Good evening, Philip Lewis. Thank you for having accepted this interview with lecturer Dr. Farr. We are pleased to ask you a few questions regarding your book, Les jours, nous, silence, published by Éditions Belfond. How did you get the idea to write your book?
The genesis of the book began years and years ago. I grew up in a small town in the mountains of North Carolina, and it's a kind of a bleak place, a cloudy place, a rainy place. It's the type of place where you have a brief summer period, and beyond that, the winter months can be long and cold. And there are very few people who lived up in the community where I lived. And in the setting of this small town, I became a father at the age of 16. I had a daughter whenever I was 16 years old, and began to be a parent in this small town in the mountains of North Carolina at this fairly young age. And as you can imagine, this was a formative experience. I mean, this was something that was not expected, and this type of thing can change the way that you see the world. And I think the earliest seeds of the barrow fields were planted then. I think it's perhaps common to become sort of prematurely reflective and aware of your life and time and mortality and things like that when you grow up, maybe sooner than you might have otherwise. And this town for me, the bleakness, this aspect, this dark aspect to it, was exaggerated, I think, by virtue of my circumstances. And for years, whenever I would go back there, it would always convey to me this sort of bleakness, this dark aspect. And it was something that, as a scene for a novel, as a setting for a novel, was something that I needed to put on paper as sort of an expurgation, as a way sort of to take it away from myself, to unburden myself from that feeling. And of course, everything with my daughter, whose name is Ashley, to whom the book is dedicated, everything worked out splendidly and wonderfully, and it's a wonderful story. But I think that's where the idea began.
So when I wrote the question, I asked myself about why did you choose Old Buckram, North Carolina? Does this town exist?
No, it doesn't.
No,
it does not exist.
It's fictional.
It's completely fictional.
Yeah.
And the idea was, so Buckram is, do you know what Buckram is?
No.
Buckram is, it's a type of linen or cotton that you stiffen it with glue, and you make book covers out of it. And so the idea was having everything in the story take place in Old Buckram was kind of a way of saying it was taking place within the covers of an old book. And my idea was to sort of harken back to the way that I think so many books used to be written. And I don't know that as many books are written that way now. I try to find them. But I love language, and I love words, and I love the old classics.
Yes.
And so writing this book was a very deliberate attempt to kind of harken back to an earlier age where people did write differently and tell stories differently, and that was the notion behind calling it Old Buckram.
Okay. What is your link with that on? Yeah, you told me that it was fictional because I noticed that the descriptions are so precise. How did you work on that?
The descriptions of the place? Well, whenever I read a book, I want to know where I am when I'm reading a scene.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many books where you're reading dialogue, and and if you sort of imagine it in your mind's eye, all you can see behind the text is just white, because you don't know where you are and you don't know what's being described. And what I tried to do with every scene was to imagine it almost as a painting.
Yeah.
And I would imagine it all out, and I would write it all out, even things that were extraneous to the text and to the scene that was being described. And so if I were, say, in a cafe or on the side of a mountain somewhere near a forest, I would describe it all out, and I would write out all the details. And I would,
even the house.
In the house, right?
One chapter.
One chapter, I know. It's a lot of detail, yeah.
Yes.
But for the house, I had graph paper, and I drew it all out, and I knew where all the rooms were and the dimensions and the layout and everything else. And so much of that didn't go into the book, but I think it helped immensely in when you walked into a room, when a character walked into a room. I mean, I knew what it looked like, and I wanted the reader to know what it looked like as well, and feel the whole ambiance, the whole atmosphere, and smell the smells, and know the texture of the railing, that would go around the second floor above the library and all that. And so I feel like if you need to put people in the place for them to really understand what's happening.
So what work? How long did you take time to write this book?
It took 7 years from start to finish.
Yes.
And it was a tremendous labor. I found it very, very, very difficult. It was excruciating, partially because of the emotional content. It was very personal to me. And it was a very honest, I think, account of life in this part of the United States in North Carolina and the mountains. It's a very special place. It's not like any place else in the world. It has so many unique characteristics, and so so part of it was the emotional aspect, but part of it also was just trying to achieve the type of writing that I wanted to do, and to be able to describe things the way that I wanted to describe them. And it did not come easily to me. I wish it had, but it did not.
How did you work on the characters filled with a lot of contrasts? How did you work on that?
The characters?
The characters, yeah, because they are filled of different emotions. There are different feelings, so it's also very detailed. So how did you think about the characters? How did you work on that?
I spent a tremendous amount of time trying to make the characters authentic, and I would do things like I would write additional scenes and create situations for them that were not relevant to or not be included in the book, just to sort of test out and see how I felt like they would react under different stimuli and different circumstances. But another thing I did was I when I was working on the book, I would write chapters, and I would present these character aspects to other people and say, is this real to you? Is this Is this how you think this person would react? Is this sincere to you? And I listened to feedback, but ultimately over time it was just I think the biggest part was when you experience events in your life that cause you to have strong emotions. It's easy just to tuck those things away and not think about them anymore. I mean, you know that you've had that experience and you carry that emotional burden with you. But the trick, I think, for me was trying to articulate it, trying to figure out how to write those things down. And saying them precisely, saying them in a way that actually articulated the experiences that I had on an emotional level. And that was a very difficult thing to do, but I believe that what it produced ultimately were honest and sincere emotions.
Yeah, because I wonder whether if you knew people with this psychology or in around you, so you work on it. Your, your style, I told you, is quite hypnotic and fluid. It is not possible to stop reading. It was my case. How did you work to reach that goal? Difficult question, I must admit, because it's a page turner. You know, you feel like reading, and your style is very fluid. So, did you have a recipe of something?
Well, it was. I think it was ear. I'm a musician too. I like to play music and I play the piano, although terribly, and then the guitar, and so I love to play music, and I love to try to sing, although no one ever tells me that I'm a good singer, which I don't understand, because apparently I'm not. But I try all the time. But what I believe that every single book should be susceptible to being read out loud. I think it's all a question of rhythm and meter and time, right?
Yeah.
And so what I would do is, I would write and work on a particular section, and I would read it out loud to myself over and over again, and I would listen for the rhythm and the meter and the sound of the words and the cadences, and then I would read it to whoever would listen. And so I would catch people, and I would say, let me read you this new section that I've written. Yeah. And I would read it, and that's not right. It doesn't sound good. And so I would continually refine it. I believe I wasn't satisfied with the text if it didn't have that particular quality that you're describing. That's at least what I aimed for. And but it took lots and lots of revisions, and then hearing it and feeling it and reading it with the rhythm and the meter.
Yeah, and finally it worked. So books and horses represented both passion of Henry's parents. Why did you choose these symbols for your story?
Books.
Books, for example, you have horses with a mother.
Yes, the books are, to me, the most important thing.
Okay.
I try to imagine life without them. Right, what would we do?
Do you have the same library as Henry?
No, not quite. I have a library.
Okay.
I have a library. Part of the inspiration for that was in my childhood home. We had a little library that was in the upstairs of the house, and then we had another little library in the downstairs of the house. And my parents were readers, and that's really what we did. Everyone loved to read, and there are a few scenes in the book where the family's just sitting around and everyone has a book. And I think it says something like, we didn't play cards and we didn't go fishing. We would read, and that's how it was at my house. And I don't know of anything that could be more important symbolically than books. My life has been defined by books. I mean, how you read a great book and the symbolism in it reaches you somehow, and you never forget it. And every the green light at the end of the dock, in The Great Gatsby. I mean, there are a million examples where you read something and it becomes a part of you. And so that's just something that comes so very personally for me. And with respect to the horses, I grew up with horses. And my mother had horses before I was born, and she used to, when she was trying to saddle break them, she'd put the saddle on them and they'd get used to the saddle, and then she would need someone a little bit heavier to sit up there, but not too heavy like an adult. And so she would put me up there in the saddle, and sometimes that worked and sometimes that didn't. But horses they're so intelligent, they're majestic animals. They're part of our family to a large extent, and we saw them be born and we saw them die, and it was just a fundamental part of my upbringing.
Your story is mainly about a lot of feelings resented by your characters, not being able to express them. Do you think it is the most dramatic issue in our society, this problem of communication through relationships?
Well, yes, I think that's a fascinating idea. we have, as you say, in our society, it's obviously troubled in so many respects, right? Mm-hmm. And it is clear to me that people do have difficulty communicating for whatever reason, and it leads to intolerance. Yeah. Right, which is isn't that the fundamental issue? Isn't that a fundamental problem? Right? Yeah. We can't seem to. People seem to lack empathy and they lack sympathy for other people and their positions. But perhaps if we were better able to communicate, I don't know. I feel like the fundamental issue that the world has faced for millennia and continues to face and may well be our undoing is our inability to be tolerant toward other people who are different. Yeah. One way or the other, we find people who we identify with, and we reject others who are not the same. And that's the source of the continual bloodshed, the strife, the difficulty, the angst, the anger, the hatred among groups. But yes, in this book, I hadn't really thought about it until you said that. I think you're right. Henry and his father, they both did have difficulty communicating those sorts of ideas, and Henry, I guess, repressed everything, and he didn't want to tell you what he was feeling, what he was thinking, and that may have been unconscious in the process.
Because in the reading your book, we are a bit frustrated. Come on.
right.
Tell the truth. What you're feeling? Yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah, you made a good work. Yeah, good job for that. Finally, your book is full of emotions which overwhelmed us. Do you think that this process is much bigger because of the silence of the characters facing these emotions?
These are very good questions. Well, I think doing it this way allows you to be part of the struggle. I think people who have lived any period of time at all have experienced things like this. They've gone through these struggles. They felt this pain. They've experienced this loss. And for most of us, it's not so easy to articulate. For most of us, it's something that we carry with us. We don't have handy tools to digest these things and dispense with them. And we carry these emotions and these burdens around with us. And I think painting Henry and his father and his mother in this way, I believe that's how people actually are. I think that's how the majority of people deal with loss and deal with heartbreak.
At the end, I will leave.
What's that?
At the end, I was relieved because he had good relationships with his sister, and it was okay with his girlfriend, etc. So finally, but yes, after that, and I asked myself this question. I wanted to ask you about that because for me it's important.
The end, where
at the end, because of this the problem of communication. So and at the end, finally he had a good relationship with his sister. That's why I was asking you that, because sometimes when they are facing big things and big events in his life, and he couldn't say anything, any words, and at the end, so when we received that, we are completely overwhelmed with emotions. Yeah, that was my idea.
Well, I appreciate that. I felt like it was important to resolve that tension.
Yeah.
Henry had obviously not done what he should have done with respect to his family and his sister Trinity through the process, there were parallels, I think, that you could easily point to between the relationship that I had with my daughter, growing up being a young man with a young child and trying to go to college and do the things that young men and young women do, and trying to maintain those relationships with family. And so having that reconciliation at the end was an essential part of it for me.
Yeah, and you succeeded.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this interview. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.